You are watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with columnist Carole Malone and political editor of the Liverpool Echo, Liam Thorp. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Telegraph leads with the Bank of England predicting inflation will climb to 11% later this year, prompting the Chancellor to indicate tax cuts will be put on hold. The Bank of England raising its interest base rate to the highest point since the start of 2009 is also on the front of the Metro, with the headline 11% hell is on the way. The Express goes with soaring inflation and a real fall in wages could see food bills leap this summer, with industry experts warning prices will rocket by 15%. Boris Johnson is considering scrapping the role of ethics advisor after the resignation of Lord Geidt, reports The Guardian. The FT goes with the leaders of France, Germany, Italy and Romania pledging to back Ukraine's bid to apply for EU membership after meeting President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kiev. Convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell believes she deserves to go free in just over 2 years. That's according to the Daily Mirror. And the Daily Star splashes on a warning not to drink too much alcohol as parts of the UK bask in sizzling temperatures. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we're joined tonight by columnist Carole Malone and political editor of the Liverpool Echo, Liam Thorp. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the Telegraph and that prediction from the Bank of England that inflation could hit 11%. Carole.
It's terrifying, hell is the right word for this. We're going to have really tough times to come. We've been talking about tough times now for months, them coming. We didn't really know what that was going to feel like or how it was going to be. Now we know. We know that interest rates, there are 1.3 million people currently whose fixed rate mortgages are going to expire this year. And those people are going to have to find a new deal. And the problem has been for a lot of householders that we all borrowed really more than we can afford because interest rates were at a historic low, and they have been for 13 years. It's incredible, and so now even the slightest raise, even a 0.25 raise, is going to put many families in trouble. And with all those fixed rates ending this year, it's going to be a real problem for people.
Yes, and the bank says it expects the consumer prices index, that's the official measure of inflation, to be a little above the 2% target in 2 years' time. So further gloomy predictions, Liam.
Yeah, as you say, Gillian, the Bank of England's target is 2%. We're at 9% now. We're looking at 11% by October, when we've obviously got another rise in the energy cap that's going to come, and a really difficult winter for so many people. I think the other thing to say is that the Bank of England is obviously doing what it can do, which is to raise interest rates to try and bring down that inflation. But a lot of this inflation is being caused by things in some ways out of its control. We've got soaring energy prices. We've got the issues being caused by war in Ukraine. We've got supply chain issues being caused by Brexit. So in some ways, we're not even sure that these measures that the Bank of England is taking are actually going to have the desired effect in bringing inflation rates down. So we're kind of in uncharted territory here, and I think there's a lot of people, a lot of households who'll be extremely worried. Certainly as we kind of come through the summer, that extra energy cap rise, we're heading into the winter, there'll be a lot of people who'll be extremely worried right now that we're headed into a really, really difficult period.
Yeah, an official
it's
date.
Interesting.
Sorry, go ahead, Carole.
I was just going to say that the Bank of England boss, Andrew Bailey, he was very careful today not to say that there would be more interest rate rises, but the phrase he used was that he would respond, and the bank would respond forcibly to signs of higher inflation. And we know that's going to happen. Inflation is going to go up. And actually the bank, Liam is saying it's a lot of its forces beyond their control, but the bank has been criticised heavily for not moving quickly enough to rising prices and to the overheating in the market. So it's, I don't know who's to blame here, but I I just know that a lot of people are going to be very, very worried tonight. I can remember interest rates, when I was in my 20s of 17%. So when people say it's going to rise to 3.5%, it doesn't sound a lot, but it is a lot if you've been used to paying 1.5%. Some of those fixed rate mortgages for 2 years were like 1.2%, 1.7%. They don't exist anymore. In the last 2 or 3 months, they have gone up threefold. So now those mortgages are going to be like 2.5%. So it's going to make living doubly hard for people who are struggling to pay their bills currently. The food is going to rocket. Rishi Sunak has already said that there's going to be no tax cuts until 2024, just in time for the next election. So people are just going to be hit from all ends and sides here. Scary. It's really scary.
Yeah, data suggesting that there will be no economic growth next year. The Metro describing it as 11% as hell is on the way. Liam.
Yeah, I mean, just to come back on what Carole said there, I'm quite a good example of what she was just talking about. I'm a new homeowner, fortunate enough to have been able to buy our first home. We're on a fixed rate mortgage, but that deal is coming to an end in July. Then we're going to have to renegotiate. If we were to be on a very rate mortgage, like a lot of people, we would be succumbing to all of the inflationary pressures that we're going to face in terms of the interest rate rising, and we would face the interest rate rising at a time when fuel is soaring, when food prices are soaring. Me and my partner, we got in the car the other day and we put 30 quid in, and the dial barely moved. These pressures, and we're in a situation where we can just about afford to do that. There are so many people who can't afford that. And that really worries me, as we head into the kind of the colder months in the winter, when people really rely on energy and things like that. I just really worry that we're heading into a really difficult period for so many people.
Yes, and we know that it's hit about £100, I think, for an average tank to fill a car. And the eye, just very quickly, we did touch on it previously, but no tax cuts for 2 years. This is something that the Tory party have been baying for, but this has sealed it now that this is not going to happen for about 2 years.
And, we really thought they were coming, because for the past 2 or 3 weeks, there has been talk of tax cuts. And I think maybe we all imagined, I certainly did, that Rishi would say something in the next 2 or 3 months and for personal tax cuts. But it's been made really clear now that that's not going to happen. So that's also, maybe a lot of people were kind of banking on that. But the problem for us all, and it's exactly what Liam said, I'm in exactly the same position as him. Mine comes to an end in about 6 or 7 months' time. We all probably borrowed more than we should have done, more than we could really afford, because the interest rates were so pitifully, wonderfully low. And now we're all going to pay the price for it.
Yes, and Rishi Sunak saying bringing forward income tax cuts will stoke inflation further, which is the opposite of what he wants to achieve. Let's have a look at The Guardian. And this is off the back of the resignation of Lord Guy's. Apparently, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, may scrap the role of ethics advisor. What say you to that, Liam?
I mean, why sort of keep the pretense up? Nobody really understood why Boris Johnson had an ethics advisor, or should I say had 2 ethics advisors, both of whom have resigned. So he may as well just be a bit honest with everyone and just admit that he doesn't really have many ethics to be advised upon. I mean, it's such an embarrassing situation for a Prime Minister. It's almost beyond description. He's now had 2 ethics advisors, 1 anti-corruption czar, all resign on him because they can't feel that they can justify their role around him. So now he's almost at the point where he's like, well, why even bother? And I can just do whatever I want, which is sort of, I guess, how he kind of operates as Prime Minister anyway. The whole situation with Lord Guy is deeply embarrassing. It's not great for Lord Guy either, to be honest, because I think a lot of people feel that he should have resigned earlier. He should have responded more strongly to the Sue Gray report. If you were going to resign over ethics, I think that report would have been the reason to do so. I compared it earlier to Al Capone being jailed for tax evasion. It just seems slightly odd that Lord Guy, the ethics advisor, has resigned over trade tariffs and not over the multiple lockdown breaches that we saw in Downing Street. But it's just another low point, in my opinion, for a Prime Minister that continues to plumb the depths.
Carole, do you think it's another low point, or are people becoming accustomed to resignations away from Boris Johnson?
I mean, to be honest, probably no one out there probably knew who Lord Gowt was a couple of days ago. Now we do. And it's interesting that this is bad for the Tories because people have just stopped talking about Boris having to resign. The hubbub had just quietened down, and this has actually brought it all back to the fore again. But Liam's right in the sense that he should have gone a long time ago. Even on Monday, he was talking about having a 6-month extension to his job, which seems very bizarre to me because he is saying that Boris has put him in this odious position, as he calls it. He was talking about Partygate. He thought Boris broke ministerial code over that. But on having thought all that on Monday, he was still talking about a 6-month extension to his contract. So something's happened between Monday and now to change that. So that to me all looks a bit weird, actually. If he was so morally affronted by Boris, he should have gone a long time ago. But it is interesting. This is fodder for all Boris's critics and the Tories' critics, because what they're just, it's exactly Ed Davey came out tonight and said more or less what Liam said. He just said, why bother having an ethics advisor when you don't have any ethics? And that's going to be repeated over and over again in the papers tomorrow. And it's a really bad thing for Downing Street to say, I think, at this time. It makes them look very bad, because what they're saying is, obviously the ministerial code is going to be upheld, but they can't say how. And if you haven't got an ethics advisor, who's going to uphold the code? Or is it just going to be an ad hoc thing? That's not a good look either currently, especially after Partygate.
And let's not forget that there's a ministerial code that the Prime Minister decided to rewrite himself. So yes. Is he just sticking to his own code?
Technically, the introduction, he rewrote the foreword, yeah. Technically. Yeah. Let's go to the break, Carole and Liam, but stay right where you are. Coming up, this story on the front of the Star, which warns Brits not to drink too much alcohol on what is meant to be the hottest day of the year tomorrow. Do come back to us. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, columnist Carole Malone and political editor of the Liverpool Echo, Liam Thorp. Oh, Carole isn't with us. And Liam's joined on the... Oh, there they both are. You'd swap sides and you were a blank screen for a second there. Glad you're back with us, Carole. Let's have a look at the FT and this story on the front page about Ukraine's attempts to join the EU, gathering further impetus from European leaders who have been visiting Ukraine today. Carole, you take us into this story.
Yeah, this is, the leaders of France, Germany, Italy and Romania went to Kiev today, and they were talking to President Zelensky. I saw a photograph of a very uncomfortable hug when Macron, this is his wont to do that, he goes around hugging leaders, and he was hugging Zelensky, who clearly didn't want it to happen. But anyway, and they were talking about, all 4 countries have agreed to put forward Ukraine's candidacy to join the EU. But it was made clear by the Italian PM today. He said the path from EU candidate to member is a path, not a point. So they're not saying that Ukraine is going to get in. They're saying it's going to be a top under discussion. But it was interesting today. Macron said, Europe is at your side and will be for as long as it takes, which is very interesting, considering France was one of the very last countries to give Ukraine weapons. And even now, they're not really handing that much over. They're the only country not to have declared exactly how many weapons they've given. And that's because they've handed over a few howitzers as a loan, and they've gifted a few shells, not much more, really. Typical Macron, though, he just wants to be seen as being the leader of everything.
This front page could potentially further infuriate Putin, though, couldn't it, Liam?
Yeah, and I think it does show the sort of stage that we've got to now, because both Macron and Olaf Scholz were almost in the earlier days of the war were criticised in some ways for a lack of action and a lack of solidarity with Ukraine, whereas the UK was actually praised in that sense. And some people suggest that that's because sort of Central Europe and Western Europe is so reliant on the gas supplies from Russia. and they are now actually experiencing some of the difficulties because of that. This is a later visit than many other European and Western leaders have made, but it's almost to the point now where it's like, yeah, that they've decided that this is the way they have to go. They have to back Ukraine. Russia have been fought back admirably into the Donbass region, and now it's a case of, it's almost like the European leaders saying, well, Russia has to be defeated in this war. And to see the Italian Prime Minister, the French President, and the German Chancellor in that same picture is quite a powerful image, actually. And I think for Zelensky, it's an important moment. Sometimes I think the war moves off the front pages because we move on, but it's a reminder of what an enormous geopolitical issue this still remains.
Indeed. Just time for this story in the Star, being warned not to drink too much on the hottest day of the year, but they're not talking about water, Carole, are they?
Do you know what these stories drive me? Because the Star clearly didn't want to go with inflation, so they had to find something to fill the front page. And this is the best they've been able to come up with. You know, it's just ridiculous. It's just like such a nannying thing to say. What most people want is a pint of cold beer on a day like this, or for the rest of us, a glass of wine. You know, if I want a glass of wine, I'm going to have one, and the Star's not going to tell me otherwise. But they.
Liam, quick thought in 10 seconds.
I think my mum wrote this front page, is what I'm saying. my Irish mother, she knows I've got fair skin, and she's always telling me to drink water, not.
And you should do as you're told. Liam and Carole, thank you so much.